weeks out from the Tampa Pro push day, high carb day. Let's dive into it and talk about it. So thank everyone for following along on my journey to stage. And I know is it a 212 or open prep? I know people just go back and forth. And honestly, I'm kind of doing, what some people have you don't have a set timeline, you have like an open-ended prep. I'm almost like an open-ended division. So it's still slightly up in the air as far as where I'll be, but just prepping to bring the best version wherever that falls. So if I don't want to make huge sacrifices to lose my best look, but also I got to be honest, everybody, to get to the Olympia is my goal. Like that is such a phenomenal experience to walk on that stage. I don't care if I was 212 or not. And it was a sacrifice in the look. Like I want to do that again and I want to do better than I ever have. So if I have the ability this year to suck down and make it, arguably that should be a very competitive 212 look. And I know realistically in the open, I'll probably still need more size. So this might be my last year to do it. I just have to see how close I get. So for this week, I ended up having some pretty good fat loss, weight drop progress. Last week, I was around the 245 mark. This week I came down to 241 was a low, seeing that pretty quick pull down in weight. Also, training performance over the past week was kind of hanging in there. So seeing the rate I was going at, how far out I was, and also where gym performance was, it's where I made the call to just do a higher carb day. So on my leg day, I ended up putting in an extra 100 grams of carbs. And the day after that is also my rest day, which is like my off of bodybuilding day. So no direct cardio work. Steps just organically happen. Renee and I usually go out and do whatever we want, date nights, movies, stuff like that. And there's no training either. So that day brought me up to 240, a little over 243. So it was almost like a 3-pound increase. And that held for a few days. It took me about 3 days to get back down to that low. And that's where I'm sitting at right now. So we'll see how that keeps progressing for the week. Looking back, like retrospectively, I think I would have not done it, to be honest, because I think just having my day off was plenty and probably could have made some adjustments through the diet just overall around training. But it is what it is. Still great physique progress. So looking at visuals, I can see a lot more detail coming in. Really happy because my quarter turns, it was still harder to control my waist. I just didn't have quite the taper yet, and now I have it. Like I have that taper that comes down to small waist and flares out in those quarter turns. Lower back is coming in more in those rear shots, and it's still got a little bit of pudge on the love handles, but that we're working on that still. But overall, really happy with the amount of muscle that's holding and also the condition for being this far out. Throughout this week too, heart rate, I've noticed that it has started to be more of a challenge to stay up. So I did just solely go on the spin bike. So I was doing 15 minutes on the spin bike, then 10 minutes of walking. Now it's just on the spin bike for 25 minutes and my legs have adapted. It's not fatiguing at all. And I'm keeping the heart rate on average around 120 throughout the session. So usually, I start, in the 90s and then it'll come up to like the 130s and kind of fall in that average. And so my resting heart rate is not in the 90s, just a FYI on that. Usually I'm floating around 66, 67 beats per minute on that. So we're not seeing resting heart rate escalate either. So those are like, it can be a good metric to track for those just trying to look at fatigue accumulation and stress in the body. We'll usually start seeing that resting heart rate start to escalate up. Also, since having that high day, and maybe this is a benefit as well, is that just sleep has improved, not necessarily duration, but sleep quality. I still wake up around 4:35 a.m. to have to pee, but even though I don't somehow sleep's kind of poor after that, but before that, the quality is high enough to where I feel focused and alert throughout the day. Step count hasn't changed this week, still averaging around 10,000 per day. Also haven't modified the diet outside of that high day, so sitting around 3,200 calories on training days and 2,600 calories on my non-training days. Other variables to bring up before we get into training, PEDs, those haven't changed either. Still sitting around 1,400 milligram total of anabolic load, and had that 20 micrograms of Clin that's been in. And I did add 2.5 milligrams of Yohimbe, which is nothing. It's just a very small amount. And we had a question on this, and I'll touch on that on the end about Yohimbe. So plan for this week is to not change anything. So I'm just going to let this ride out, because over the last week I pulled down nearly 4 pounds. So we should see that happen again. I'm thinking by my check-in day, I might need to just hold off on changes as well, just because that high day took a few days to get back down to the baseline. Regardless, the weights, the looks improved. So let's dive into this push session, and I have not shown this one yet. Probably an old footage somewhere. It's around, but on this one, this session is primarily chest biased. Now, I still always start off with a lateral raise, just because basically side delts can't be big enough. So, and also they're not fatiguing for the rest of your session. Like, your side delts aren't really going to impact your pressing. Still using the prime lateral machine is just been my go-to. Currently, even my other session, that's all I use. Holding dumbbells and even the cables were beating up my elbow actually, so just been solely sticking to this one. Setting it up on the cams on a setting of 5, which kind of loads right off the bottom, and doing 4 sets here still, so still holding that. And I pretty much take these all out in effort, because again, they're low fatigue costs for this exercise. And just take notice in how I execute these. They're very intentional for every moment of that range of motion. So come down, allow the full stretch to happen, have nearly a slight pause, and then control up to the top with almost nearly a slight pause as well. And that is just keeping that intention, keeps good tension on the side delt and trying to limit a lot of the other stuff that can be brought in these movements. Next, I move on to the prime pec deck fly. So I'm doing a fly first on my chest focus day, because for me, I have a hard time. Chest is my weakest body part, development wise, but also to keep a connection with. So I was doing pressing first, and it just kind of got away from me to where I was losing the connection. So it helps with starting with a fly and then going to pressing. And it makes me have to use a lighter load on the pressing, because there's some fatigue present anyway. But I don't think it takes away much. So why I say that, because how I set these up with the prime is to load heavier in the shortened part of the movement. So as you're reaching peak contraction, so I'm not incurring a lot of muscle damage loading heavy on the lengthened phase. And we know fatigue is specific to the range of motion as well. So you're not going to fatigue out that range in the lengthen and the stretch when you go on to your pressing. Now, that's not to say you won't have some fatigue though. And also it's a fly, so it's not like I'm doing a squat before I go do a bench press. With the setup on these, you'll notice I do keep my hips out slightly to make sure I have good alignment for that humerus path to line up with those lower mid pec fibers. Another cue that I like is as I come back into that stretch, I allow that rib cage to expand. We know the chest, the pec kind of acts like a fulcrum across the rib cage. So if you really flatten out your chest, you're gonna have a harder time leveraging and using the pec in that movement. So keep a big rib cage using on this exercise. Did 3 sets here, then moving on to a dumbbell flat press. On my pressing, since this has been more the challenging area to maintain performance, I have pulled back 1 set on it, and just also on my incline press as well. We're down just to 2 working sets. And for these, what I did notice is that, upon reviewing the footage, like my alignment, I probably need almost a slight decline to really align best and get more of the pec involved. So we'll see how I want to modify it from there. Also, you'll see on these, like I don't make it a huge point to make sure I'm like fully locking out the elbows at the top. It's damn close, but you pretty much get a lot of joint stacking somewhat at the top, to where if your real focus is pec development, that last lockout, it's like all triceps. So don't make this fatigue out the triceps before you're fully fatiguing out the pec. after the flat dumbbell press, moving on to a hammer strength incline press. On this one, you'll see another one where my hips are kicked out a little bit. And if you notice the pec contraction versus the flat dumbbell press, I get a lot more pec out of this one. The alignment is really, really good. That's kind of what I want to see out of my flat press that I need to make some corrections to. I also dead stop these just to standardize my form. Also, for one, you spend a little bit more time in the lengthened stretch position, and there's a safety component as well to it. And I don't think it takes away anything from stimulus as well. In this exercise, 2 sets, then we move on. Next exercise, move on to tricep isolation work. I do a single arm cable extension, basically because I don't have awesome external rotation. There's not a lot of attachments that'll line up well. Also, that can keep you in a really good wrist position. So single arm is great for me. I let that cable, I'm kind of offset in the video, but I let that cable make sure it's running directly through the shoulder joint, the elbow joint, and keeping the wrist neutral. And do 3 sets here, a little bit in a higher rep range, around 12 to 15 reps. You'll also see a surprise visit from Renee, because Renee's in the zone. She walks past my camera and is in the mirror just trying to steal my thunder is all she's doing. But anyway, Renee's prep is going just fine. That's her update. It's better than mine. Renee loses body fat way faster than I do, which doesn't seem fair. But anyway, going on to the last tricep isolation is an overhead tricep extension. Now, it's not quite overhead, it's kind of in front of head, but I would set this up based around your ability to externally rotate at the shoulder. Some people can get overhead just fine, but you'll see a lot of people that, if you're using especially like a skull crusher, end up the wrist is bound up well, or you get elbow pain. When that's the case, usually it has to do more so with aligning yourself with the right movement. For this position for myself, I get as much overhead as I can within my ability, and that also gets the tricep to a more lengthened position, and we'll do it that way. So just do 2 sets here, still in this 12 to 15 rep range. And last exercise of the day is calves. So it was a push day. I guess I am pushing with my feet. So we'll count that one in. And on these push days, I just do 4 sets of a straight leg calf. Usually I'm on leg press because we have a donkey calf raise, but I can stack it out. We have a Smith machine you could do it on, but I just rather use something that's more stabilized and braced and not have to worry about loading axially and just lock in on this one. Spend time in the stretch position for your calves. Like, get it in that lengthened state and own that. That is the money position for building big calves. And also like ankle toe in versus toe out and hitting different parts of the calf. Don't do it that way. If you need calf size, just set up to where you can have the most tension, the most force production, and that's going to give you the biggest overall calf. So keep a foot position that keeps you stable and allows you to fully plant with a lot more pressure in the big toe and a little bit on the pinky toe. So don't worry about all the fancy foot positioning doing calf work. Okay, some questions from y'all from last time were, what were my thoughts around clenbuterol and yohimbine used together? And look, I'm actually doing that. I think, for one, using multiple pathways to drive fat loss is a great idea because you can use kind of small amounts of each thing. But for one, clenbuterol, it's a beta-2 receptor agonist. So you have beta-2 receptors on fat cells that causes liberalization of these fatty acids into the bloodstream. Also, when you have yohimbine in place, yohimbine is an alpha-2 receptor antagonist. And the alpha-2 receptor is not that great for liberalizing fatty acids. It actually causes the opposite to occur. So we have basically a gas pedal and a brake pedal for fat loss. Your clenbuterol is pushing down the gas, and your yohimbine is helping you take a foot off the brake. So now we're all gas pedal. That is my simplest analogy of how the synergy can work together to improve fatty acid oxidation and liberalization and mobilization. Other question I got, and this has been covered, but I didn't cover it initially in this video, was my training split for this prep. And it's still a push-pull leg setup. I do push-pull legs off, push-pull off. So basically easy, 2 push sessions a week, 2 pull sessions a week, and 1 leg day. And that's biased around towards what I need is primarily upper body, and my legs are a strong point, so they just get once a week. Last question is, when do you know when you could do bodybuilding as a full-time career? And for a full-time career, it has to be something that can support you financially fully, right? Much harder now just solely bodybuilding directly. Usually it's going to be encompassing sponsorships. It could be some from show winnings, but that's not really going to be most people's kind of bread and butter. Usually the sponsorships is what it is. But now usually, like for all bodybuilders, we're having to do something outside of just that alone, because even the contracts aren't fully supportive of what we would take to have a fully financial stable environment. Especially, this is going to vary from people. Like, are you a single guy living in an apartment, or do you have a wife and kids? That really changes what it means to be a career bodybuilder. But at that point where it's a career, usually I would say, hey, that is the person that is at an IFBB pro level that also is able to have a financial gain from that is supportive of that lifestyle, which you're going to know when this is happening. It won't be, because a lot of people have questions like, oh, what could my potential be? And you have to kind of keep seeking that out to really see it to fruition to know. But what I would say is, like, once you're fully in, go hard for 5 years in bodybuilding. And if it's not happening and you're still having to work multiple jobs and bodybuilding's not paying the bills, that's when you should know. Stringing out any longer, I think we have places where we might be in denial of what we really are achieving here, unless you just fully love it. But I also say, don't let bodybuilding steal your like real working years as a young guy or girl, because this is primary time to establish yourself for your career. You can do bodybuilding, but just do it to a different capacity if that happens. So, but if there's something you love to do, it doesn't mean you have to get on stage to do it. Find other avenues to bring in career. So working as a coach is a lot of people go to, or trying to build inspiration, motivation, be an educator, something like along that lines. But anyway, everybody, appreciate you following along. Any other questions, leave them down below, and we'll talk to you next time.